Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. Welcome to our first Finance and Appropriations Committee meeting of 2016. Happy we're all here. We know that Jody's going to be joining us a little bit late. We have a couple new members of the committee. Certainly we're pleased to welcome Board Member Michael Cole to the committee. Certainly not a stranger to the district, but new to our Finance Committee. And Brian Stewart, former board member, will be joining us. He was just appointed, so Stan, I don't know did you hear back from him if he'd be joining us today?
I don't know that I heard directly back from him. I don't know.
So we welcome everyone back. And so with that, if you could please call the roll and we'll get started.
Chair Hudson?
I'm here.
Ms. Zaranen? Board Member Cole?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Board Member Peretti?
Here.
Mr. Robinson?
Here.
And Mr. Stewart? You have a quorum.
Okay. So a couple things that we will be doing. We'll quickly go through the treasurer's report. Certainly that was all circulated ahead of time, so hopefully folks had time to review that. I do want to ask, then we will be reviewing, we'll have a couple of administrative issues, and then we'll go through our FY17 budget presentations. And thank everybody for being here. I know everybody's been working very, very hard, and I'm sorry that my back aches. And we really appreciate it, just ahead of time. We are going to go be as efficient as we can with time. After a couple hours, everybody starts to wane. So if we have to do, if you're towards the end, if we need to do an overflow time, my apologies in advance. We'll try to go as efficiently as we can. Everyone, please silence your phones. So I'll speak more about that. I will ask if we can consistently, Scott, do you plan to have folks sit up here? Okay. So everyone for the budget presentations will be sitting over there. And so with that, I think our first order of business is to approve the minutes from back in November 12th, our November 12th meeting. So motion for approval?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Mr. Treasurer, if I'll turn it over to you for the current financial report.
Okay, thank you. In keeping with I think you referred to it as quickly review the January financials. So this could, I don't know that I'll be able to keep with the speed that the controller did at the January board meeting in my absence, but we'll see how we do. What I'd like to do is typically in the past couple of months, there's not been anything monumental. There are, I think, 3 items in this report that I'll discuss with you to highlight. First of all, as you can see on a current year basis, about $501 million in revenues, $477 million in expenditures, and an ending cash balance of $162 million. We like to focus on the monthly variances and explain those. As you can see, revenues this month are up by about $26.7 million, and revenue and expenditures are under plan for the month, and we'll explain how we got there. The 2 items of revenue I'll cover quickly: general property taxes and the state funds that we get, the state foundation monies. As you can see, those are the major contributors to us being ahead of plan. General property tax is very simple. It's explained by this graph, and that is we are in a collection period. We anticipate a certain amount in advances to come in January and February, and then to settle up in March. It just so happened that we came in above plan on January, and that will even itself out.
I wanted to ask, do you expect that to even out, or is that
Yes, we expect that to even out. There's
Okay.
no reason for us to think we're going to get more first half than we had originally anticipated.
Okay.
Or more significant.
But we can always ask. It's always good when
It's
the
always
red
good to
line
ask.
is above the blue line.
And as is the case often with school finance, month-to-month variances are important if they're indicative of an annual impact, and usually I point that out too. But in this case, these are just, we thought it would be January, it's February, kind of a thing. On the state revenue side, we've experienced 2 months where we got a little pop over what we expected. And I'm going to explain to you that This typically happens, it's more of an accounting function than it is a change in annual revenue numbers, because we are capped again, remember, on state revenues. So in this current month, in January, I'm showing you here an excerpt from the SFPR report, School Foundation Payment Report, just some of the top lines that amount to the dollars that were capped. And what the state does in this calculation is they show an annual amount, and that's the capped amount, what they paid us up to date, what they owe us then for the balance of the year, and depending upon how many payments are remaining, they divide that by that number of payments, and you come up with a monthly payment amount. Now, keep in mind that the capped amount is not what we're calculating. I think the calculation comes out about 86 million higher. So because that year over year can only grow by 7.5%, that's the growth in the cap this year, they come up with the bottom line first, that 296 million. And for accounting purposes, then they have to allocate that back to those lines above. And so on a percent to total basis, over on the calculated amount, they just allocate that 296. So this doesn't mean that we get 163 million in opportunity grant, the first line. It means that's the allocation out of the 296 that we're going to account for in that line. That's just the math mechanism of being on the cap. That's the January 1 payment. The January number 2 payment, we would expect with no changes in annual amounts, that the year-to-date prior would go up by about 12.3 million to 160 million, which it did. It computes a new prior balance remaining prior to the payment being made for January 2. You divide that by 11, you come up with the same payment. But what happened in January number 2 is that the state began to use the current ridership and mileage numbers for transportation, and that number went up in the calculation. When the number goes up in the calculation, it changes the percent to total allocation of the cap. So as you can see here, 296 was our total before the change, and 296 is our total after the increase in transportation. But what it did was it affected the allocation among the lines. And as you can see, the 4.8 million pop in transportation was offset by the lines above it in the negative amount. So that was an accounting reallocation. I highlight the bottom 2 lines, special ed and career tech, because you notice there's no change. Because they come through from the formula at 100%, because they technically aren't subject to the cap, yet they come over at 100%, the cap is only up 7.5, they eat up the first 38, 39, 40 million, and then we allocate the difference to the other lines. So, okay, they come over at 100%, but it just takes it away from accounting perspective from the other lines. No matter how you do this, we get 296 million. So that change also drove a change in the balance to be paid to us prior to the January 2nd payment being made. So it stayed the same. They owed us 135 million for the balance of the year. But as you can see, the difference between what they owe us by line has changed in the same magnitude as the annual amount. What this tells us is that it appears that they owe us 4.8 million more now in transportation, but they've overpaid us for all those other lines. Well, that's an accounting mechanism, okay? That's not necessarily true. But the way they then calculate the next month's payment, they have a rule. If we've overpaid you, from an accounting perspective, we'll spread that difference out over the remaining payments. We don't want to hurt your cash flow by catching you up. But if we've underpaid you, like the 4.8 million, we're going to calculate a catch-up payment and bring you up to where you should be had the revised annual amount been in place from the beginning of the year. So looking at transportation, the annual amount is now 28 million. After the January 2nd payment, we will be 7 months through the fiscal year. So what they should pay us by the end of January is 16.3 million. Just prior, after the January 1 payment, just prior to the January 2 payment, we were at 12.5, 12.6 million. So the catch-up payment is $3.7 million. They plug that into the formula. All the other lines are the balance due divided by 11, because we've got one payment in January and then 5 more months, 2 payments a month. And we come up with this convoluted monthly payment, which happens to be 2.4 million higher than what we would anticipate on a smoothed out 1/12 every month. So that's why we get the bump. This evens itself out, and at the end, how much do we get? $296 million. Okay? That's where that bump came from.
The school finance.
Yes.
The same thing happened in October.
Yep.
It all gets
Yeah,
corrected.
every
at the end
time,
of the year.
every time they update the data, recalculate the annual amounts, they catch us up on some lines, and then they spread out the difference. You remember last year what happened in March? We got the numbers, they made this huge huge catch-up payment, so much so that we couldn't pay all the deducts. So remember the $8 million that they essentially advanced us, and now they're taking away from us 1/12 at a time? Remember they asked me, do you want us to write us a check for $8 million, or do you want to hang on to it, and we'll take it out next year? I said, is that a trick question? Sure, I'll take the $8 million, we'll invest it as best you can, but we'll take the $8 million, we'll pay you back later. Okay, so that accounting mechanism causes all sorts of issues, and that was very odd for us. On the expenditure side, we're running 11.8 million. I just wanted to show you this graph. If you recall, heretofore I mentioned to you that December became the 3-pay month, and I thought it was January because January was payday. I just wanted to show you it worked itself out. While we paid it in December, January came in under, and that's payroll driven. But primarily here, once again, all the non-personnel lines, all lines other than charter schools are running under plan, charter schools running over plan. Remember, the plan is convoluted because it's based on last year's experience. And we're really not 11.9, but if we spread it out, we're just a couple million under plan.
But in corrected plan.
In the corrected plan. Now, here though, I've skipped some other graphs that I typically show you for sake of brevity. Here's the critical graph. These are the annualized numbers. I just went back to October because prior to that it's meaningless at this point. But the two numbers I want you to focus in on are the blue number and I think the purple number. The blue number represents what's coming to us from the foundation payment calculation. And as of January 2 payment, it's $163.4 million for these two line items, charter school STEM and scholarship, 478 object and 479 object. What we have appropriated and what we based that we based both spending plans on that, but the spread evenly across that month, the purple line with the X's, that's $163.1 million that we have appropriated. So I saw that and figured we could be a couple $100,000 short in our appropriation. Then I looked at the Feb 1 payment. I realize this is a January report, but I can get I've got the Feb 1 payment data. Now, that number for charter schools has jumped to 165.4. So it appears we might be 2.3 million short in appropriation. And in the MD&A, I mentioned that personnel's running under, all the other lines are running under. I'm not going to run to the board and increase appropriations by 2.3 million. I think that Scott and I will work together and we'll figure out where we can adjust the appropriation. It probably will be in the personnel and fringe benefit lines.
Okay.
So while that seems like a large number, we've got enough favorable variances in expenditures that we should be able to cover that. Keep in mind, every time I get a payment, twice a month, these numbers can change. ODE is constantly updating numbers. And believe it or not, I don't know if you put a clock on that, but I'm done.
So, I'm sorry, the $12 million for charter school variance, is that timing or is that a real variance?
That's an aberration because the plan was off. You remember, I could pull up the other graph, but the plan had
Why don't you go
suppressed
back to
numbers very early.
why don't you go back to 29, just slide 29. There.
That one?
Yeah, isn't that show the, so isn't the.
Actually, what you want to see is a slide that,
Oh, that's expenditure.
hang on a minute. Let me just, that's the slide you want to see. So this blue line here are the year-to-date variances against the plan, and this is the plan line. And see the spike? So we're really not running over plan relative to an even payment schedule, which is what it should be. I mean, if we had all the data up front, it'd just come out 1/12 every month. That's why I did the revised plan. So against the revised plan, you can see here, we're under, up through January on a year-to-date basis. Does that make sense?
Not completely. I'm still seeing a year-to-date variance of $12 million. And you're saying that will, again, go away, or that's?
It will go away.
Bad market?
It will go away. It will go away right when we get to I lost my pointer.
Stan,
Right
do
in
you want
April and May, it'll go away.
And
Because the
remind
plan
us-
has this huge spike in it, and we're not going to see a huge spike because we just got the data in January and February. So that spike is occurring now, not in May. So we should begin to catch
Bottom
up.
line is we are not going to pay the charters and others $11 million more than we had budgeted.
No, 2.3 right now.
Correct.
The 11.8 was total expenses were under.
But charters were over by 11 something. Yeah, we're not paying, no. That's because the plan is off.
And does that mean that the other positive variances on purchased services and personnel will continue to benefit from that performance, and will end up the year in a positive position?
Yes. Yes. Okay? We probably should have just gone back and revised the plan once I realized that it was based on something that really wouldn't be indicative of its behavior this year. To substitute for that, that's why I did the green line that's flat. That was a better substitute for what would happen this year. And that's why I got.
We should have, because it's.
Yeah, it's good, but then if we don't meet every month, you
Yeah.
all gotta kind of catch up. But this is why I do it on an annualized basis. Like I said, month-to-month variances, I don't care about unless I get an annual change. This is the first time relative to charter schools that I'll tell you, I have an annual change that we are concerned about.
Okay. Very
And-
good. Are there any other questions
That concludes my
for Stan?
report.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you. But,
I'll pull yours up.
and then, but wait, there's more. So I think
Wait,
our
wait.
last, we want to go on to
Go
the
ahead.
next agenda items.
Sure. At the request of the chair and committee members, we've been reaching out to learn as much as we can about tax incentive programs that are used by the city of Columbus to encourage economic development, most specifically TIFs and CRAs. TIFs, if you don't know, are referred to tax increment financing, and CRAs are, I believe it stands for Community Reinvestment, areas. There you go. And both of them have an aspect to them where the city could exempt temporarily or abate for a period of time property taxes. Our investigation of TIFs, we met with the county, and just yesterday, Eric Roush and I met with city officials in their economic development department. The TIFs in the city of Columbus are not school district TIFs. In other words, they do not waive the property taxes. We are made whole. I won't bore you with how that works, but we get the money. That's what we're concerned about. CRAs are a little bit different, and in varying degrees, they could abate those taxes for a period of time on the incremental value that accrues as a result of the development. Up to 75%, the city can do that and just let us know. Above 75%, we've got to act on it. We have met with the city. We're getting some data from them. I don't have it yet, but we're looking at and in the CRA, they share income tax with us. When the payroll gets over $1 million, they share half the income tax on all of the payrolls with us. So on some of the properties, there are, I want to say 16 or 18 CRAs that we are getting income tax sharing. It is, I think it's one, you know, Mike, off the top of your head, is it 1.2?
Well, and the point,
We've got one, for this past tax year was 1.7 million in income tax sharing. And what I've asked them to do is go back through all the CRAs and give me an estimate on income tax sharing versus property taxes foregone. I think we'll see a positive spread there. And then for some of the smaller ones, we don't get any income tax sharing. So try and get a feel for the revenue foregone versus what we get in terms of revenue sharing. I believe that there are, for the report I have from the county, we have in total CRAs that involve property within the district. I want to say there were over 1,700 individual parcels. And I think the dollar amount that was placed on it was about a little over 16 million, but that's spread out over a 10 to 15-year period. So we were looking at when those CRAs roll off. I'm sorry, it's 2,563 parcels. We're looking at doing a matrix on when those roll off, but the caveat is that CRAs roll off and they put CRAs on. So it's not going to be a big change over time. It's not like all of them coming off at one point. So in terms of looking for additional revenues, I suspect that our ultimate analysis will be, if it is a net positive, it won't be a large number. Large to me would be in excess of 5 to 10 million a year, and that's just not going to come from changes in CRAs, because they come off, they come on. Even if you spread that 16 million out over 15 years, and they all went away and they never did another one, it's about $1 million a year. But the good news is that we've established some really good communications and meetings with the county and with city officials, and we're going to share data back and forth and just stay in touch with them so we know what they're thinking and doing, and if we can help them in any way, we will.
Well, and likewise, $5 million is $5 million. As
That's
an
true.
example, it's important, and I think it's important so that we're educating folks in the community about what that means for the community and for the district, and likewise that they know we value when those burn off so that those funds come back in the school, so we can account for it in the forecast. Even if it isn't, a larger, it doesn't have another 0 or 2 behind it.
Such as I'd like.
Yes.
Do they have any concentrations of the parcels within the city? Do they kind of show where those, where the most concentration is and where the burn off is?
I did not ask that question. I suspect that they very well know parcel by parcel and area by area, neighborhood by neighborhood, where they are. But we didn't, I was more concerned at a macro level of overall what have we
I
got.
think the county auditor has done some additional analysis if you wanted to go to their website, so, as he's done some other analysis on that. Mr. Superintendent?
Thank you. Probably not for this meeting, but maybe for a future, a refresher on low-income housing tax credits. This tends to be the flavor du jour now, where tax credits for low-income housing developers can reduce their overall valuation, provided they submit a plan that shows how they're partnering with the district. And we're receiving a number of those requests with a due date of next week. And although we hadn't been contacted by the developers prior to this point, when in fact that's been known since September. So I think it's worth probably the Finance Committee's having a little primer on that.
So if we can hear about it next meeting or when convenient, I think that would be great to add into the mix. Thank you. Thanks for the due diligence on that. I think I think it's important to just make sure that we're, again, turning over every rock, make sure, the revenue, we know what the revenue is, and we're, as, community knows that we're doing all we can to account for all the revenue.
It's just good to open up that line of communication.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
they know, how we view them, our perspective. And so that if during their course of business, they see something, they can perhaps see it from our perspective and give us a heads up so that,
Yes.
that you know, if they do something from economic development that really doesn't impact us, if something, for instance, appears in the paper that they've got this great economic development package going on, we don't want everyone thinking that the schools are getting shortchanged if they're doing a TIF, for example, when in fact we aren't. So we can respond to that appropriately and timely, and keep everybody well informed about how they actually work, so we don't get misinformation out there.
Right. Because people do have very diverse views about how that all works. So, do you want to talk about the meeting schedule?
Oh, I just attached the meeting schedule once again. I know I sent everyone an invite, and I wanted to give it to you in writing, just once again, and I think everybody's either accepted or put tentative or declined. I know we have some scheduling issues. Chair Hudson, you've got a meeting that doesn't work, and we'll get to that, but I just
we
wanted
can
to
all work that
reiterate
out.
that schedule for everyone, so you have it.
Right. Very good. Any questions from the committee? Well, let's, pardon? Oh, I thought somebody had a question. Well, I'm just wondering if we should have the presenter, Scott, would you want the presenter to sit here and I can swing over?
Well, Paul said he's put a chair down there, an empty chair.
Why don't we put the presenter here? Because there's a mic. Paul, would that work okay? Why don't we move here, and then maybe I'll just go over here,
Okay.
Brian's seat, and then you guys, you just have one person, or if you have more than one, bring a chair. And,
Should I move?
no, it's good.
Okay.
Let me go over here.
We should play some music.
And then I think it'll be easier for Paul, and, because of video this, so then everybody can see, and the mic is here. All right. Scott, well, let me I'll move over here, and then I do want to say one thing as we get started. So just to level set for everyone. Oh, thank you. Just a level set for everyone. So this is the FY17 budget presentation. We are just doing the expense side, operations. So just keep that in mind. This isn't capital, and also it's just we're not talking about revenue today. It is important, and keep in mind. So this will be, I'll ask the superintendent to provide some background, but this is more of a vision budget. What the goal would be, I think, for all of us as finance committee members, to keep that in mind. This will be the framework for us to then look at, compare this to forecast, and ask questions of the administration, and to provide the board with guidance on how do we look at this budget in relation to existing and forecasted revenues, and thoughts about additional revenues. What would you need? We need to accomplish this budget, and so the finance committee will have those analysis points go forward. This lays the foundation for that analysis. So we'll do this in a couple parts. But we have to do this part before we can go on to the other parts. So, and we can't do it all in one day. So, so with that, Dan, do you want to take this, do the
Happy
intro?
to. Thank you. Actually, you said much of what I was going to say.
Oh, sorry.
No, you may recall from the 5-year forecast slides, there were 3 slides that indicated these things are not included, but we should anticipate that those things would be included in future expenditure proposals. And so there really are 2 or 3 slides per operating unit that'll present today. And operating units are things like curriculum, career tech development, assessment. And the first slide will be those aspirational goals, where we see the district in 5 years, or when we will be the #1 urban education center in the nation. And then the next slide will show kind of where we are baseline presently and what we need to do next year in order to put us on that pathway to that 5-year stretch goal. And so I'm very, very proud of the team that's in the room and those that also supported them in preparing for today. Been a lot of work. We've had visioning meetings, standard setting meetings, budget presentation after budget presentation after budget presentation, that we have more data than anyone would care to see, and we can answer just about any granularity of question you may have, but we hope what we present keeps it at the high level, and you'll be receptive to that, Scott.
Thank you, Dr. Good. And I do want to reiterate what both the chair and Dr. Good have said. though, we're going to have our presenter sit there, Sean. The amount of work that our folks have put together on this it cannot be understated. What we've gone through, we're now in year 2 of a new budget process. The first year was just a one-year look. What we've done this year is with this hybrid zero-based model that we've done. We've taken this to a very, very big next step, that we didn't just look at 1 year, we now looked at 5 years. Programmatically, what are we going to do? There aren't many districts in the entire country that are doing this, so what the team sitting behind you, they're the ones that did all the work. A lot of blood, sweat, and I think probably some tears that we've gone through this, but they have done a tremendous amount of work to bring forward kind of what we're saying, what it's going to take to get us to the next level. You know, what do we need? What is that aspirational budget? Where's our vision? So we know that, you know, this is where we're going to start. You know, there's some things we're going to have a lot of work still to do. There's going to be some tweaking and some paring down that we need to look at, but this is our wish list. So this is what we're bringing forward to you. I'm going to go through these really quickly because you've seen this before. You've heard me talk about this. We want to get to the meat of the presentation, which are the requests and what it is that we're looking at. You know, we reviewed current programs. We've identified areas where we can make changes, where we can be more efficient, things that we need to adjust, things we need to reduce, and then the things that we need to enhance to take us to next. Obviously, as we did this, again, we're very, very focused on aligning these to the 3 district goals, because I do not believe we should be proposing any budget for programs that don't align to these 3. So this keeps us focused on that. Obviously, the Finance and Appropriations Committee with public input, transparency, that's who you are. So we have that public vetting process that we go through, the members here. Our budget timeline, just to keep this in front of folks, because I know that each month we kind of see that, but I want to make sure you folks know what's coming up. We start this in October with the current 5-year forecast. December, we kind of send out the worksheets to folks. January was kind of that month where folks put it down into, you know, put pencil to paper and put it in the spreadsheets. February is our budget hearings. We had a few rounds of internal budget hearings that we talked through with ourselves, and then we're here doing the initial presentation to the Finance and Appropriations Committee. We'll take some guidance direction from the committee and the board going forward, go back and kind of revise some things, potentially bring a revised proposal to the board, to the group in March, and then we'll fit in that between March and April. Then we'll get into the staffing piece that we'll look at as well. So then we'll present initially to the board in April. Then in May, we'll bring the budget accompanying the 5-year forecast, because now what we've done is the forecast in October did was we took FY16 budget and said, hey, we're going to do the same thing for the next 4 years. This 5-year look, this on the expense side, that piece will now fit into the 5-year forecast. So we can say each year for the next 5 years, here's what we're doing. And so then we're talking about the what and when. So that's going to help that piece. And then we'll come back in June for approval of the appropriation resolution by the board for implementation of a July 1 fiscal year start date. Budget flow chart, that's boring. The annual appropriation resolution, we did change this with the new policy this past year, because in the past, everything was approved at the fund level. So in Board Policy 6231, we made a change. Everything except the general fund is still at the fund level, but what we did was we broke the general fund out into personnel and then non-personnel, further breaking down the non-personnel into those OPUs that Dr. Good talked about, which are our departments. So I think today that's worked very, very well for us, that we've only had one change that we've had to bring to the board and it was because of alignment of responsibilities for Infinite Campus to move from information technology to accountability. No additional dollars, just moving responsibility from one to the next. So we can sit here and say that it's working very well. With that, I will quit talking. The order of the presentations for this evening, obviously, why we're here, it's to educate children. So obviously, academic services will be first, followed by accountability, business and operations, the superintendent and the departments under him, treasurer, CFO, internal auditor, and then we'll follow up with the board's accounts that they have.
So I would just ask if we can, come on, please come on, David. Anybody else, we can bring up more chairs. So Reggie and Jody can scoot down a little bit. Oh yeah, let's swing that chair around.
Yeah.
Well, there'll only be 2 presenters at a
Okay,
time. so-
okay. While everybody's coming up, let's try to keep this within 2 hours. And I know we can do it, and I apologize in advance, I know all of you work so hard on this, and this is what you live. We're at a little higher level on this, and this way, if we have questions, board has questions, we can come back as well. Want to welcome Board Member Gibbs, and I think I was remiss in welcoming Board Member Brown here to join us today. So with that, please begin.
Well, thank you very much.
Please introduce yourselves and your position.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Baker. I'm the Senior Executive Director for Academic Services. And Pegeen is joining me right now here at the table, but I also have the other executive directors behind me who will each be coming up as we go through the presentation. Just to give you a little context of the Department of Academic Services, of course, is officially led by our Chief Academic Officer, Alicia Gillison. We also have the Office of Career and Technical Education and Workforce Development, which is led by Pegeen Cleary-Potts, here to my left. The Office of Teaching and Learning, led by our Executive Director, Sandy Donald. The Office of Innovation and Improvement, which is led by Executive Director Marcy Giraffes. The Office of Special Education and Student Support Services, led by Executive Director Kathy Leffler. And then finally, the office that I lead, the Office of School Leadership Development. And that comprises the entire Department of Academic Services. We're going to be going through each of our OPUs one by one. What you will hear from us today, we're not going to go through the specific little details such as this OPU contains mileage reimbursement, and this is the OPU where we purchase office supplies, things like that, because those are built into so many of our budgets, and those are those day-to-day operations that we just have to have. What we are going to share with you, though, are our 5-year dreams, where we would love to see the Department of Academic Services be, and what we want for our kids and what we want for our teachers 5 years from now. And then just for the FY17, we'll share with you those big items that are really driving the budget for the year. So some changes or some modifications to things that we have made from this FY16 into FY17. So we're going to start with the one OPU that is in the general fund budget for Pegeen's office. And this is the OPU for Career Technical Education. Certainly in the next 5 years, we would hope that this budget would be able to support an increase in student enrollment in the career tech programs that we have. Our dream is to get to 6,000 students by 2018, which is a lofty dream, but I think it's doable. We want to, of course, expand the number of offerings that we have in our career technical and workforce development programs. And we want to continue to develop a robust career exploration program for our starting with our 6th graders and our young students so that they can start to plan for high school. Getting into just next year, however, just into FY17.
David, I have a quick question.
Please.
6,000 from,
It's right under 3,000 currently.
okay, thank you.
Good question. Go ahead, Scott. Looking at the highlights for this year, we're going from last year we requested 173,550, and it's looking like more of a 167,175. Highlights in this OPU, certainly we have students who they will be taking assessments for their industry credentials, and because that is part of the curriculum, I feel it's very important that we pick up those fees as a district and pay for those students to take those credentialing assessments. And as well, there are certain competitions that are required for our students to be involved in, and since that is a curriculum requirement, making sure that that is covered in our budget as well. We want to cover the transportation for our 8th graders to get them to the Career Center so that they can see those programs in practice and start to be inspired by those programs. Paying for a middle school camp that is career and tech related. We have not had a textbook adoption in career tech for, I believe, 8 years. Is that right, Pegeen? 8 years. So it's time to be looking at new textbooks for various programs. We're able to look at getting Adobe software for not only the career tech programs, but the entire district through this budget, and it is cheaper to do that in the way that Pegeen has been able to look, so we'd like to be able to do that. Looking at technology for some specific program expansion, specifically one that I'll call out is our cybersecurity program that we would be adding for next year, and making sure that there's technology for that program. And then finally, looking at student and staff professional memberships, since those are part of the requirements, making sure that those are covered in that budget. And that is the only OPU in that office. So any questions for Pegeen while we've got her at the table?
Maybe a comment, just, I think it would be helpful, because of the significant dollars, to be able to, as we drill down into this, what are the top 5? And then also from a prioritization perspective, what are your top 5 priorities?
And I think we have that listed in some of the budgeting documents as well, so.
Yeah. And likewise, in that division, does it distinguish between establishing, like new established programs versus current programs? Are there currently any middle school programs right now?
There are.
Okay.
And there will be an increase even next year. In all middle schools, we're getting the Gateway computer
Okay.
programs added at the middle school level.
And is there a way so the Adobe software, I guess I'm just wondering why that wouldn't be in the IT budget.
Originally, the Adobe package was purchased through Perkins. We could have bought the same thing, but Perkins, you can only buy 1 year. For the same exact money spent, we could have had it for the entire district, but because it was bought under Perkins, we could not do it for a 3-year period. You could only buy 1 year. So by taking it out of that fund and putting it into a general fund, we can support the entire district for the same exact amount of money, but also extend it from a 1-year to a 3-year. Because under the Perkins grant, you have specific deadlines of how you can spend the money and how long. So 1 year versus a 3-year.
But is the IT division, the IT department is not funded solely through Perkins, right?
Did you see that one?
The Perkins piece that Peggy is talking about, those are grant dollars.
Yes.
That's for career tech. And it was interesting that you mentioned the IT piece, because as we went through this, there are a lot of technology requests. And one of the things that we're trying to look at is consolidating those, because that same question came up in our internal meetings. Is that something we should streamline and propose through the IT budget as opposed to separately through other OPUs? So that's something that we're having those conversations about.
I don't know committee-wide, but I think it would be helpful. I think it would be much cleaner to have the technology there so that, the career tech budget, if someone says, wow, this has jumped up, that it isn't reflecting, like career tech is, they're benefiting, but only proportionally, as opposed to paying for the whole district. So I think then we would have a more, a clearer view of what IT spend is, but also, we're not saying, kind of penalizing career tech. Yes, Michael?
Well, in this instance, and thank you, Ms. Potts, because in this instance, what you clearly articulated is a very intense savings. I mean, we've taken.
We want to do savings, that's all, yeah, I'm all for
We've taken
that.
something that was allotted for a very specific purpose and now have been able to streamline that amount through the entire district to all of our students' advantage and our staff. So I thank you so much for even thinking out of the box to do that, so.
Absolutely, yes.
So I'd like to make one comment. So not only with technology, that could also be done with equipment, it can be done with professional development. So we have aggregated by object. This is by OPU, by operating unit. But if we look at common function, then we can pull those things together so you can see the overall district expenditure being requested in the area of training, in the area of equipment, non-technical, and so on. So we can slice it many ways. We
Okay.
wanted to show where those objects would exist in terms of programs in this particular budget.
Okay.
Right.
Board Member Gibbs?
Yes, thank you, Sharon. You said you want to increase the technical enrollment to 6,000. Where will you house 6,000 students? Can you define what enrollment means?
So currently, we're just under 3,000, and I have the printout right behind me, and I forgot it, but there would be a definite boost in the middle school because we are going to implement the new, it's Gateway to Technology curriculum for actual computers for all of middle school starting next year, so there's a big bump there. Additionally, we would increase numbers. An example, the cybersecurity, immediately that will be next year an additional 25 to 50 students. Outside of that, like cosmetology, we're adding another class because we always have a wait list with no cost of an additional teacher, just reallocating duties and different things as such, so there would be an additional 25. So I can give you an actual outline if you'd like to see that, Ms. Gibbs.
Okay, because the clarification, when I think of enrollment in Career Center, I'm thinking high school. So maybe the clarification is enrollment in career and technical courses. at the
Programs that
middle
are lead
school, and
pathways.
Programs at the high school. So I'm saying, I don't think 6,000 people can fit on Fort Hays campus. So
Yeah.
that's immediately what I thought.
And it's a good call out, and you know, it's going to be really challenging when we talk about where we want to be in 5 years. We have to be careful that we learn to expand our own experience bases. So career technical education occurs in 110 schools now, not just in 2 career tech centers. Cybersecurity can be taught in a flexible space in any building. Health billing and coding, computer lab can be taught in any of our 110 buildings. So although it's a career tech offering, it isn't necessary that it only occur at a career tech campus. So it's a great question, and nice earrings.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Cole had a question.
Just from a higher, just thinking about this from our level of things, is this aspirational budget really just us looking at where we're looking at expanding and building capacity in these learning areas as you just highlighted? Whether it's career tech, whether it's any other part of academic services, we'll see increases in these areas either because we're shifting dollars to accommodate a broader range, or we're actually investing and trying to expand growth area and potential. Is that?
It's a both and. It's a great question, and I would add that there's even another place where it's to actually bring us up to a base level. You remember that we're in hundreds of millions of dollars in deferred maintenance now, and so you'll see by program area, dollars we're saying may be necessary to bring us up to standard in terms of facilities, although those might qualify for capital should we have capital resources available to us. But it's those, it's also expansion of current programs that we know we have demand for and are industry responsive, but then it's also those visionary things like the cybersecurity programs, like the auto collision. We had a great meeting with the Ohio Automobile Dealers Association, and they asked when the last time we had our car service, and they said you make an appointment, it may be a month now before you can get in because of the shortage, and it's now a very technical career. It's no longer necessarily a bolts and wrench or belt and suspenders career. So, you know, we're also looking to be responsive to what those emerging needs are going to be.
One last one. So just for the sake of time on this whole piece as well, as we go forward, all of these things will be revealed to us, and we don't have to so much drill down on.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Do you think?
Right.
So, right, I do,
Okay.
yes. Yes, Board Member Gibbs, last question on this.
And so, you know, with the Chamber of Commerce breakfast this morning, and we get forecasts all the time of where the industry is going. Are the programs you are proposing in the expansion aligned with all of the economic forecast and industry predictions for not just the area and the region, but where industry is going other than auto tech? I mean, that's a great one.
Absolutely, but we look at the jobs in demand, specifically in Ohio, but also nationally. And we are looking at the employers that are coming to the plate and asking specifically for workers, and are developing even pilots as we speak to bring the interest to students to those particular careers. And then also important to your point, currently about only 1,700 of the 3,000 students are in career centers. And we're looking to having career center programs throughout the high schools and in middle schools because there's a direct correlation to graduation rates if it's up to a career of interest.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you very much, Becky.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. So move on to teaching and learning.
Absolutely.
And as we move to teaching and learning, Mike, I'm wondering if you and Board Member Gibbs could switch so the microphone could be over by Scott, so sometimes he'll be chiming in. I want to make sure folks, this is taped, that folks can. Sorry, Shauna, don't mean to keep moving you around.
So while the shift is taking place, if I might note, one of the other considerations in the budget development was the release by President Obama's administration of their FY 2017 budget request. and anticipating where there will be increases, but mostly where there will be decreases in federal funds. And so making certain we accommodate those programs that have been successful, but funded perhaps through title allocations, and now having to shift those perhaps to general funds. So that was a consideration as well.
Okay, very good.
All right, moving on to the Office of Teaching Learning, and again, that is led by Executive Director Sandy Donald. OPU 904 is our general OPU for the Office of Teaching Learning, and kind of in that 5-year vision for what Sandy and her team are planning for the Office of Teaching and Learning. Certainly continuing to provide those rich learning experiences that are aligned to curriculum and support the needs of our students, not only our students in K-12, but also pre-K and beyond. Looking at pre-K to college and career and making sure that even those youngest students are in that pathway and ready for whatever is after high school. Providing research-based and evidence-based curriculum and interventions for students, and providing the professional development that goes along with each of those for our staff to be prepared to address those needs with kids. Providing resources to allow students to matriculate through the grade levels and be able to graduate on time with their cohort. And then being able to empower our community and our parents to assist with our students at all grade levels. And we'll talk about in a couple of the budgets here in this department on how we want to start addressing some of those needs of our secondary. We've done a great job with elementary the last couple of years, but it's time we also provide some supports for our secondary parents as well. So let's go into the specifics for this budget for next year. This budget request for next year will certainly support the work that City Year has done in multiple schools across Columbus City Schools. It will also support the credentialing of our third grade teachers to ensure that they are credentialed appropriately to teach reading according to legislation and statute around the third grade reading guarantee. Also, along with the third grade reading guarantee, we are required to provide tutoring for any students that we retain into the third grade who would normally be matriculating onto fourth grade. So this budget does support that mandate. Also looking at research-based interventions that would reduce those non-academic barriers as well as the academic barriers that students face that often keep them from seeing success. And then also addressing and supporting our Countdown for Kindergarten, which was a great community event last spring, and we'd like to continue doing that as we move forward. So that's budget 904.
And let me, real quick before you move off this page, if you just share for the committee, for our community members, 2 things. One, what is Countdown to Kindergarten? And second, your increasing success numbers on third grade reading guarantee.
So, good evening, everyone. Countdown to Kindergarten, one of my absolute favorite events. And so with Countdown to Kindergarten, there was a focus on ensuring that our earliest learners are transitioning into kindergarten the first day of school ready for success. So we had a community event where we partnered with many community partners, and we provided parents with activities that led up to the first day of school, counting back 100 days. So from the date of the event up to the first day of school, parents were given one activity to work on with their student around literacy, math, social, emotional, or physical. They were given an activity to work on at home. And all of that was in preparation for the first day of school. In addition to partnering with those community partners, because we wanted parents to know what's available in the community for free, we also partnered with fire, police. We wanted our students, our boys and girls, to feel very comfortable with those entities as well, and know that these are people in the community that we can depend on, but they also support learning in many ways.
And then third grade reading
Third grade reading guarantee. So 2 of the things there that this particular budget supports is teacher credentialing and third grade reading guarantee. Any teacher that works with a retained third grade student or a third grade student that is on a reading improvement and monitoring plan, their teacher is required to meet certain credentials per the Ohio Department of Education. And so we work with teachers to ensure that our teachers are in compliance. Literacy Collaborative in the past has been one of the ways that we go about credentialing teachers. As this budget will support more of our teachers taking an assessment, which will credential them for as long as they choose to teach third grade. And so we will be working on that. And then for the third grade students that are retained, if parents request, then we would pay for tutoring from an outside provider. And I think I heard you talk about games. And so for this year currently, we're at about 72% of our kids that are meeting the promotion score for advancement to 4th grade. And so everyone sitting in this audience has played a major role in ensuring that happens.
And where was that for the 3rd grade class a year ago?
We didn't have the
Did you
MOY
have that?
and
Oh, okay.
MDMA
Yeah.
map MOY data then. So we can say it was at 10%. No,
Yeah,
2014, it was like 42%.
wasn't 40, yeah.
at the beginning of the year it was, yes. So
Yes.
this year we have that mid-year checkpoint as well, and that's what this number, we didn't have it in the past, so.
Yes, so, thank you. Did folks have other, Michael, did you have a question? Okay. Oh, okay, thank you, sir.
Just on the teaching and learning, on the credentialing, how will you manage teacher mobility and teachers that may move out of the 3rd grade band and some that will then come and then moving around to different grade levels? How will we maintain consistency or be able to track or make sure we have enough there?
So, again, one of the things that we're looking at, well, first of all, principals. So they're very aware of who's credentialed in their building and who would be there to support that. Through this year, we've had a staffing plan in place from ODE, which afforded us to not have credentialed teachers as we work toward credentialing more teachers. So we monitor the movement. That's going to be a building-based decision to ensure that that happens. But again, the conversation we've been having with principals is as you move people into 3rd grade, ensure that they're willing to take the assessment to get the credential. And the assessment is 1 day, 2.5 hours, and it's a web-based assessment.
And so if the kindergarten class comes in this year or 1 year and you only need 1 3rd grade teacher, but then you have a boom because we had a, code spill, and now you need 3 kindergarten classes. Is your idea that you will credential more than you need in case you need to expand?
Absolutely.
The
And so
classes?
that has been an ongoing question. And for the credentialing purposes, it only applies to 3rd grade teachers. So we may have K1 and 2 students on a reading improvement and monitoring plan, but for the purpose of 3rd grade reading guarantee and us being in compliance, the only teacher that has to be credentialed is the actual teacher of record for 3rd grade.
How does that impact the split? A 2-3 split or a 3-4 split class?
Yeah, of those 2 examples, we would only have a 3-4 split. We try not to do the primary splits in our buildings, of course. And if we are teaching a teacher or a student who is technically a 3rd grader, who is on a reading improvement monitoring plan, then that teacher would need to be credentialed. And so we would make sure that they hold that very same credential as any other teacher of a full 3rd grade class.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Mr. Goody, do we see any significant increase in investing in our middle school curriculum and development in those areas?
I
Is that
think you meant,
reflected in this at
Yeah,
all?
no, do you want to talk where the middle school would fall? Any changes in middle school curriculum?
No, not changes in middle school curriculum. We're looking at providing additional resources to middle school. So for instance, in one of our budgets, and I believe it's the very
That's
next,
the next one.
we're going to talk about a novel refresh for middle schools. But for the actual curriculum, we're not doing anything vastly different there. We're looking at to make our courses more rigorous and make sure they're aligned with state standards, but no major changes there.
I guess my question is really around resources, though.
Oh, yes,
And-
In terms of
absolutely.
investment and strengthening our middle
Yeah.
schools.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
I
actually you'll hear
think we do
that.
have a number of other slides here, so
Yeah.
maybe parking lot that, and then we'll see if they cover it. Okay, all right.
You'll hear them not only in the curriculum one that we're about to present, you'll hear probably in textbooks when we do the various adoptions as we go through, and as well in the content-specific areas. There are certain resources that have been allocated specifically for middle years.
I do think, though, it's a great question. It wasn't brought up in the career tech, but we do 612 career tech advising now. And so later this year, for example, at Deltonia, where we're piloting it, we will be taking 58th graders to the Career Tech Center once a week, to participate in activities there. So that is a modification in what's available to them to accommodate their different interests. So it came through the career tech budget, not necessarily through the teaching learning budget.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ready to move to the next one?
Please.
All right, this is the 905, this is the K-12 curriculum budget. So kind of that 5-year look for budget 905. rolling out Chromebooks and getting more technology and access to more technology for our students. That's certainly important as we look at how to deliver that curriculum with our students. Providing an opportunity to engage in that digital learning for students and increasing that opportunity. This is also where we would be providing resources for our faculty and staff to revise curriculum, go back and look at curriculum resources, what is working for us, what is not working, and how do we continually refresh those things so that we can maintain that rigorous delivery of content to our students. And then also, this is where we want to provide some resources for making sure that those family and community events are not just centered around elementary students, but also reach into those middle years and even our high school families in how they can best support those secondary students. So that's the 5-year kind of outlook for 905. Specifically for next year, again, increasing the digital and blended learning opportunities for our students, and the way to do that is to give them the access to that technology. Our K-12 curriculum director, Leslie Kelly, has collected some incredible data about specifically a math program that we are using this year and that threshold of access that's required in order to see students be successful. And so our goal is to get that same threshold for all of our students so that they can all realize that same level of success. But it is, of course, putting more technology into those buildings. Establishing those secondary literacies nights, training our coordinators on how to deliver that digital content so that we are not always looking outside, but if we can train our own curriculum coordinators in Google Classroom and other best practices around digital content, then they can work with our teachers in-house and get that done. And again, those Chromebook carts that we want to specifically target next year for the middle years programs.
So question, is this tied from a funding standpoint, is this tied to grant dollars, or is this just another initiative that you're taking out of the general fund? The reason I'm asking is this may be more of a technology-driven cost as opposed, I mean, I know the curriculum aspect, but it goes back to your larger question, Dr. Good, about maybe where it is a placeholder. But it's just, you know, when I see it's doubling in cost, it just made me say, man, if I took the technology component out, what really is the cost for the other rollout components?
Looking at the details of this, the technology component of this is just under 1.7 million. So that's more than answering what that change is for the Chromebook.
So it has benefit beyond the current year, so it's really buying software and other hardware. So it has a 5-year utility.
Right, that's not something that's just going to be 1 year and done.
A year-to-year type of expense.
Yeah, and I think that it kind of raises the issue, I mean, I don't want to suggest we do anything different today.
Right.
But for the next meeting and the next presentation, probably we should do is have, you know, some meat on the bones in terms of numbers of, you know, what this includes and what those differences are. I think the board isn't going to be able to make those value decisions or you know, evaluate that with just these top line numbers. Hold on, I think Shauna had a question real quick.
Okay, just a quick question. I'm looking at what you've laid out. I didn't see it anywhere else in the presentation, but in terms of the curriculum, we have several middle schools where you can earn high school credit at the middle school level, but that's not district-wide, I don't think, or there are some schools that have expressed interest in having those higher level courses available at the 7th grade, and with College Credit Plus, having those opportunities available to more students. Is that reflected in the budget, and are we considering investing in expanding those opportunities to other school buildings?
So when schools make a decision to add a course to their course deck, there's a process and there are some questions that we would ask. So at that point, we're determining what resources are needed and how we're best able to support providing those resources to the building. So that would be more so in our textbooks, if we're talking about books, because that's normally going to be the cost associated with adding a class to the course deck for middle school. And the other piece that we have to look at is if we're giving high school credit to ensure that that teacher has the appropriate credential to teach that course.
And if I can add to that too, in a couple of the OPUs that you'll hear about later, we do talk about expanding College Credit Plus, we talk about expanding AP opportunities, and of course along with that is looking at that pathway it takes to get there. And so students, as they see what those opportunities are, will recognize that the pathway has to tighten down, and it may be that I have to take a more advanced course at a younger grade. And so then that would be our clue that when we have to start building those into those earlier grades for them.
So does this budget that you're reflecting now reflect the survey or what middle schools have said they wanted? So have we done that work and say, hey, does anybody want to add high school credit? Have we asked the middle school principals if they want to add high school?
So we have not surveyed middle school principals. That's normally them reaching out to us because
Okay.
they're aware of the process. And to your point of College Credit Plus, we actually have another budget that
Okay.
reflects the tuition and costs that are associated with College Credit Plus.
I figured that, but the high school credit at the middle school level, we've just heard from parents that they wanted that to be available in their middle school as well. So I just wanted to know, does this reflect that? And if not, how do we inform that decision on how it happens?
Yeah, as they have the need to put those courses into the buildings, that's when they then, as Cindy said, they go through that kind of process. They let us know what that course would be. We kind of then go through with them what resources we would need to put into that building, and we start that process. That would start in later spring as we start building master schedules, and they know what their courses would be for the following year.
Thank you.
I think the other piece of that too is again, remembering you don't have to have the physical proximity to have the instruction and the credit offered. So we do quite a bit of distance learning now. And so the the children need the mobile technologies, but where you'll see it reflected in a budget, Ms. Gibbs, is in the area of technology where we're equipping more of our buildings with those distance learning capabilities. And that's true for not only higher ed, but could be also middle to secondary. So.
Awesome.
Remember, did you
I
still
just
have a
have
question?
one last thing about the technology aspects of things. What I'm kind of seeing here is that there are some complexities, if you will, that don't give us the opportunity to really assign a direct allocation to something that we could consider IT per se, because it has an in-classroom application. Is that fair to assess? Is that a fair statement?
Give me an example, I'm sorry.
Well, it's.
Okay, so something that would be more, in my mind, IT oriented might be how we streamline distance learning throughout the entire district, how we streamline Wi-Fi throughout the entire district. I would imagine that that would go directly into an IT budget that Ms. Van Dyke would oversee. But some other investments we may make in IT are much more in-classroom related. Whether it's, I don't know, but I see.
Maybe like a Chromebook cart rollout.
Right, yeah, why OPUs have a specific amount of resource allocation towards things that are IT oriented that won't go into a particular IT overall budget in the general fund. Does that make sense?
It does. And so the challenge for the Finance Committee and also to the board is recall that we've spent no less than 6 entire days generating and presenting that kind of detail. I mean, there are 88,000 lines, I think. So if you want to have input on that level of detail, down to the object level by OPU, we can certainly do that, but we'll have to figure out a different kind of format to do that.
Well,
so we do reflect them in the program areas, and we can aggregate them, like I said, by technology and give an overview saying this overall technology object reflects X number of Chrome carts for these kinds of purposes, X number of projectors for these kinds of purposes.
And
It's pretty granular.
Well, I'll push back a little bit. I don't think we have to get into each cart and each projector.
Thank you.
But I do think, like, in this, like, the highlight, if those are the highlights, for example, or, so this budget doubles. What are the increases, and then are there any, what are the deducts? What came out? But I think that's the, so it's more than just the top line, because it really doesn't provide, like, from a numbers perspective, any way to evaluate that. And I think to the to Board Member Cole's point as well, you know, if it's classroom versus, like the Adobe for the whole district, that's why I thought, well, why is it in Career Tech? And I understand, you know, that we can live with that. I mean, that it isn't about being neat and tidy.
No, that's the space I'm in, but that's why I asked the
But I
question.
think, you know, it's about classroom, it's classroom learning, I'm fine with that. I do think just to, what are some of the, you know, how can we maybe, not to the granular per line area, but somewhere in between that and just one line?
And not even just, and I'll leave it alone after this, but not even just from the standpoint of being granular or, you know, macro in our way of thinking. To me, it makes sense to just have folks on the committee understand that there's some complexities involved with why something won't particularly be an IT, you know, type of budget assumption as opposed to something that you might see reflected in academic services in any number of our OPUs there. That's all I'm saying, if I'm making sense. All I'm saying is that there's some complexities involved. We can't always make it look black or white, but we know the impact is going to be extensive and multi-year in relation to what we're doing.
So let me propose this then, just throw it out there, and it may not be a good idea. Versus our doing that for everything, maybe the questions that are generated at this level can help us know where you would like more detail drilled. Otherwise, we're going to create dozens and dozens of notebooks this side for each of you, anticipating where you might have those questions. And if that would help, I think that's something, David and Sandy, kind of look at you to see if that's something you think is more manageable. At least kind of, so we heard questions relative to technology and how we could bust it out that way.
And how we can highlight that specifically.
But
Again,
I think
I don't
also-
think any of us are interested in, at least for me, but I think I heard you say the same thing, MJ. That's not our interest. Our interest is just to ensure that when we get these types of questions, as Mr. Robinson asked earlier about, okay, I was thinking, why wouldn't we put this in the IT bucket as opposed to this being an OPU investment or per OPU investment? Because, as earlier explained, something might be relative to that OPU that could be more broadly used throughout the district, and then you explain that as you did here in this meeting. It's just for clarity's sake, for us to understand on this level that the complexities involved with understanding that certain money is going to go into certain buckets for a very specific reason that is helping us show efficiencies or economies of scale. Again, if I'm making any sense.
Sure, and kind of, I'm sorry to interrupt, but kind of to your argument, when we started this process and we sat down as a curriculum team and we were looking at the multiple OPUs that are in teaching and learning, there were Chromebooks in probably 7 or 8 of the different OPUs. And so in the last week or so, we said, why would we want to do that? Let's combine them all, put them in the K-12 curriculum one, so we had them in one place, and that's where we can see that they're not just a math cart or a language arts cart or a science cart, but this is the carts that we are providing for the students in this school to have increased access. So kind of similar to, I think, what you're talking about
Yes.
in terms of the whole district, we did that very same thing within the department.
So I just wanted to try and put that in a little better perspective, that's all.
And I would just clarify, get to your question, I'll just clarify, for me, it's, you know, that if there's a big budget increase, what increases? But tell the story with some numbers. And I think for here, it isn't, for the finance committee, it isn't as much, some of it isn't as functional, although for the board, it's to understand why that jump, what will that jump mean in terms of academic performance or service to students, et cetera. That's the story, and for us, but it's identify what is that jump and why, you know, why.
So one of the, if I may speak to
Yes,
that.
please.
With this particular budget, we did a math adoption last year. And so we have a web-based math intervention tool. And so one of the challenges that schools often have is ensuring that we have enough devices for
Yes.
students to access and take advantage of that intervention tool. And so in those places where there is great access with technology, we've seen significant gains. The data looks really good. So the goal was to make sure that as we purchase, these intervention tools, then our children, when they're in school, they actually have access to the device so they can take advantage of that tool.
And we do have those numbers. I mean, the bulk of that increase is the technology right there.
That's right.
That's it.
Good.